Hi, and welcome back to ScottiesTech.Info. This is Tech Talk with Scotty, that's me, Tonio, my Mexican tech bro,
Hey.
and of course, as always, Cletus the Tribble. Oh, he's talking.
What is he saying?
He's talking about today's video, which is the Great Tech Reset. Follow the money. So, when you think of the future of technology, you probably think of AI. And that's not surprising because the hype around AI has reached like enormous proportions and it's actually becoming pretty ridiculous. But and of course, you also have the fact that we're told that AI will be replacing us, our jobs, our lives, and there'll be essentially nothing left. So you're probably also terrified of the future. But I think there's a bigger change in technology that is kind of happening behind the scenes. And it's coming from multiple countries, but one country in particular. And this one country in particular is essentially out innovating at a breakneck pace all the tech companies in the West. And that one country is China. Now, I know in the past I mentioned China, and many people go, Chinese Communist Party, Chinese Communist Party. And this is also not surprising because historically, especially in recent years, what we hear is Chinese Communist Party. We hear that we have to have sanctions on China because China is bad. And every time there's any tech news, anything happens in China, they develop something, they create something. You usually read an article about it in Western tech news and regular Western, mainstream media, and they usually poo-poo it to death. So even if it's actually like a really big development, like DeepSeek was, for example, they tend to say like, yeah, well, but the Chinese are copycats, they just steal it all, and so forth. So the interesting thing that stimulated this whole video was that, contrary to the past several years, there was an article published on a mainstream American website, and it kind of spilled beans on the auto industry. So I would like to take a look at this article. This is an article on the Los Angeles Times, and it's entitled, "China is Ripping Up the Rulebook for the Global Auto Industry." Now, I'll put a link down in the description to this, and you can read the whole thing. It's really, really interesting, but I'll just cover some of the key points real quick here. So, auto industry giant Stellantis is thinking about using Chinese electric car platforms for its Fiat, Opel, and Peugeot brands. Those are, of course, all mostly European models. Stellantis is also talking with Xiaomi, Chinese company, to secure Xiaomi's investment in its EU operations. So we've got Chinese money pouring into the EU auto industry. Even Mercedes is in talks with Chinese car company Geely, also again to cooperate on electric vehicles. And this is actually particularly interesting because it's Mercedes-Benz. And just the other day, I posted a note on my Substack that Porsche is in deep doo-doo because they bet the farm on EVs, electric cars. And I think they spent something like, I don't know, some billions or something, and their profits dropped literally off a cliff. So they're basically in big trouble right now because they counted on EVs and green energy and that sort of thing, and then couple that with sky-high energy prices, and you have kind of a disaster. We also have Nissan Chief Financial Officer Jérémy Papin, who said in an interview, "What China gives us is access to the same advantages that have reshaped the competitive landscape: speed, technology, and cost. You will start to see the first of these China-sourced products reach global markets soon." Oh, really? In fact, China is so popular now in the auto industry that executives use a term, China speed, because basically Western automotive companies, from start to finish, they start designing and developing a car to when it goes into production. That takes 5 to 7 years. Chinese car companies do it most of the time in less than 2 years. They move so quickly that they can throw together a car in 3 times less time. And another little interesting point here that I thought was pretty insane, speaking of German automakers, is that between the years 2000 and 2023, China had 5 times more patents than all car makers in Germany combined. That includes, of course, Mercedes and BMW and Volkswagen, which historically are brands that sort of define the automotive market. And also parts manufacturers like Bosch, German company, they are outsourcing their electric car part engineering to China. So, yeah. The reason this kind of bowled me over was, as I said, like in the past several years, we don't see any real news. I mean, of course, people like us, we know because we follow tech news and we know people in industry, we're talking to people, and you can kind of see the writing on the wall from our techie perspective that, like, yeah, China is kind of an up and coming tech powerhouse. But the minute you say it to someone who's a non-techie, they go, ah, yeah, because all they've heard is that, you know, China is bad, China is evil, China copies us. And so here on a mainstream news site, we have this article where they're basically saying, now granted, this is for the European auto market.
Yeah.
And of course, Europe is in due to because of the Ukraine war, they're forced to buy like LNG at 2, 3, 4 times the price from the United States, as opposed to getting it from Russia. And European industry cannot survive, literally, without cheap fuel. And then now, of course, we have the Iran war going on, and that's causing oil and gas prices to go even higher. And China, of course, doesn't have these problems because they have a secure supply of energy. They have a secure supply of raw materials, mineral resources, rare earth magnets, petroleum products. And of course, they literally manufacture everything. Everything we own is made in China. The difference now is that it will also be designed in China and also probably made in China. So the last thing that the article mentioned, because this is, you know, one of the reasons I think that this article was published was because it was talking about the European auto industry. And they kind of mentioned like, yes, but we here in the US, we're not actually playing ball with China yet. But they do happen to mention at the very end that Ford Motor Company is apparently in talks with Chinese automakers. And they're also talking with the US government, and what they're trying to do, they're looking at European car makers and they're going like, wow, if we don't get on board with China, like they are literally a powerhouse in technology for cars. They do it cheaper, they do it faster, and they're doing it better. If we don't get on board with this, we're screwed. So they're trying to get an okay from the government, and, you know, yeah.
Yeah.
What do you think about that? Because I was like, what?
Yeah, it's super interesting how it's moving. It reminds me of that, you know, European firms usually will be seeking or looking for investment from the US automakers. Remember, you know, some of those brands were already, you know, owned by some of their American counterparts. And now it seems that the shift is happening once more, and this time moving east towards China. Do you remember that other news article about that? I think it was a Chinese chip maker or semiconductor factory in the Netherlands that was expropriated by the government from the Netherlands. And then,
yeah.
right? they tried like to give an impression that they could be some, maybe autonomous, independent, by taking over. And the result was that the Chinese were just not to play along that, showing that they had the upper hand in this relationship, with the EU, with the EU market, and the results. I think everyone understood that that was not the way to go, and now the partnership is moving away, at least on paper, from the US and towards China, because this is a very it's hyper competitive landscape for the car makers, right?
Yeah.
So, anything that talks about efficiency and go-to-market strategy and, profitability, well, a lot of these brands are in deep trouble, right? Because as we have seen, I remember that Jaguar attempted that strange promotion and rebranding that went totally kafooey, right? So in a sense, they have learned the hard way, and it is a very unforgiving market. Especially, the car market is relentless in that sense that you can be a 50, 60-year-old company, and then one little thing, or one misrepresent, or not reading properly the market, can just tank your brand. So in that sense, they are going into the more conservative approach and strategy, and trying to be profitable and adapt as fast as they can. We will be talking about a lot of things around what the US is also doing in terms of not automaking but AI. I have some things to talk about, but this is super impressive.
Yeah, and it's also worth noting that it's in the automotive industry, it's kind of complicated because, as you said, they're European and American automakers were kind of working together. I mean, for example, I remember decades ago, General Motors, like a Chevrolet car, had this new Ecotec engine, and at the time that was actually an Opel designed engine. Opel, which it was in Germany, and blah blah blah, and the lines blurred. And of course, everyone thought like, oh, this is like ingenious American technology. No, it was actually a European designed engine that was used in various General Motors cars. So it was American owned, but the engine and part of the powertrain and interior and stuff was designed in Europe. And of course, automakers share platforms and blah blah blah. And now all of that is shifting. If this article is to be believed, they're shifting all of that to working with China, right down to like the individual components, where like the article said, Robert Bosch is outsourcing the design of components to Chinese engineers because they can do it faster and better. Yeah. Like, this is Bosch. Everyone knows at Bosch everything is great, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing is the car companies, like already Chinese automaker Geely, they actually have majority control or ownership. It's a little confusing because in some cases they have like a 51% ownership, in others they have, there's like different types of controlling stakes. So it wasn't clear from the article I read, but basically Geely, Chinese automaker, effectively controls Polestar, which is an electric car maker. As I understand, they're fairly popular in North America. Many people regard them as superior to Tesla electric cars. Geely also owns Lotus, famous, sports cars and such, and also Volvo.
Yeah.
So Volvo is effectively a Chinese-controlled company now. They still have their design center in Sweden, and they still have some autonomy. But, with this whole globalization thing, all the lines have blurred. And before, globalization meant basically it's like the US and Europe were working together, and we've got those people in China over there manufacturing stuff for us. Now, China is just going like gangbusters, and their middle class is exploding. And I talked about it in my video the review of, I think his name is Kai-Fu Lee's book AI Superpowers, where he talks about how the Chinese government invests in startup companies, and they get capital and they compete with each other, and effectively China is out capitalisming the West. And I mean, the results are pretty insane, and it's not just in the automotive sector either. I mean, you and I have talked about this before, and I've talked about it on some of my videos. Like, over half of AI patents are coming from China.
From China, yeah.
They released an AI processor that was the size of a mini fridge that uses a fraction of the power. I mean, these are still experimental things, but it's like in the West, we've got data centers that are ruining neighborhoods. And Microsoft and one AI company, I forget which one, they came out the other day and they said, we're going to use AI to help us do the planning and zoning to get more nuclear power plants to power AI.
Yeah.
I mean, like, you can't make this stuff up. It's become so ridiculous.
No.
And then you got a bunch of Chinese engineers over here, and they're making their own graphics cards. They're making their own microprocessors. Like you mentioned, like the extreme ultraviolet lithography. Everybody says, oh no, like China could never catch up. They're actually working on their own EUV machines. And there was an article about it, I think end of last year, early this year, where they claim that they're actually on the verge of a breakthrough, and they claim it may actually be better than ASML's EUV lithography. And if this automotive industry article is any indication, we should probably start listening to them when they make these claims, because they've even got their own entire operating systems. Huawei created Harmony OS, which was just for smartphones and tablets. Now they're like, we're going to make it a desktop operating system. We're going to, they're going to have their own operating system. Like, everything across the board, they're just going like crazy.
Yeah, it's incredible. Also, as you were saying, outsourcing the designs, it's kind of crazy, but you mentioned also Volvo, they want to, have some control. But the truth is that the industrial capacity in the European Union is on free fall, right? Given, especially Germany. So we also have heard news about factories closing there, Volkswagen, among others. And it only makes sense that they just, try to retain, at this point, just the brand name, and everything else is done, including the engineering and design, elsewhere. So it's kind of, sad in but reasonable at the same time. But what it means, I don't know.
It's necessary, because, I mean, I live in France, and, Germany is just next door. Germany is the European Union's industrial powerhouse.
Yeah.
And they're like a disaster right now.
Yeah.
And, the other thing was the green energy thing. Like, that's pretty much decimated the European economy. I mean, it's like, they said, shut down nuclear power plants. I think it was something like 31% of the EU was it the EU? I think it was the EU was powered by nuclear power, and it dropped to 15%. Germany closed all their nuclear power plants. And then the other day, Ursula von der Leyen comes out and goes, we need to reinvest in nuclear power, because that was a bad idea. So between now and 2030, we're going to, I'm sure they're going to use AI to try and do it. And it's like, you should have come to TekTalk with Scotty Antonio, because we could have told you not to do that. That's a really dumb idea.
Run it, for efficiency purposes. It's kind of crazy that they are going back. I've also heard that the European Union, and especially some of the big players there, they just saw they're writing on the wall, this is not going to work. Let's backtrace and do something else. Let's retake the nuclear energy. Going back to your
No, I was just going to say, I don't know, I forgot. Carry on.
So I was thinking, do you think that, what I'm sensing from the Chinese is that they are still heavily investing in the R&D, right? Research and development, but mostly I think there is a great emphasis in research. But I don't see that in the US, at least not at the same as it was, I guess, during the Elon Musk era of OpenAI, because since 2019, they have moved to this, some sort of for-profit organization. And what they have become is an equity firm, essentially, meaning that they want a lot of investors and they want to scale investing in data centers and whatnot. But with the Chinese, I believe that the government is very much involved in the research and the grants and just propelling the startup industry. And a lot of the universities receive a lot of support from the Chinese Communist Party, in the sense that they are the main drivers of innovation there. I think it's interesting that it is that on one side, it was initially an American initiative, and a lot of the advancements of AI came from the US. And then the Chinese are catching up. They are also investing, but they are not investing the same amounts as the US, because it's bonkers what they have been investing in the US compared to the Chinese. But I believe that this specific application in the car industry makes a lot of sense, because we've been talking about how the AI is trying to, take our jobs and whatever. But the application, the real world application, it's kind of confusing still. You can talk with an LLM, you can instruct them to do something, but using that application wise into the car industry makes a lot of sense, because it speeds up these development processes. So I guess they're doing better at this point.
Yeah, that's actually pretty interesting. That may actually be exactly what they're doing. I mean, they do it with material science. You use AI. It's not a large language model, but it's a similar type of thing. But you use AI and you iterate through like molecules until the AI figures out one, and then you look at it and go, "Oh, geez, that's brand new. That'll work." They're doing the same with medicine. The Russians are doing it. The Americans are doing it. I assume probably the Chinese are doing it too. And you use AI to, iterate 80 gajillion times, and it'll find a custom cancer treatment for an individual patient. Like, these are applications that are 100 times better than, like OpenAI's Sora, which they just canceled. I type some text in, and Sora generates a beautiful video. It was amazing technology, absolutely fantastic videos that it generated. Disney had a $1 billion contract with OpenAI. They just canceled the whole thing the other day because it's just it costs too much money. It uses too much power. They need more data center. Like, none of it makes any sense. And then on the other hand, we know that like China and other countries are deeply into AI. Like, China has the most patents in AI. Yet what they're doing is they're developing industries like the automotive industry, where they're using these tools to improve their manufacturing, to improve their product development. It's like, you have to wonder if they're not using them in an actual smart way as opposed to the dumb way.
Yeah, the dumb way. I mean, the dumb way could potentially be just try to gain market share, meaning let's make it free for everyone. Let's burn cash at incredible rates. The investments from the big tech companies, starting with that partnership between Microsoft and OpenAI 2023. And then, of course, the announcement early 2025, just when Trump got into office, it was SoftBank and Oracle and OpenAI investing heavily with the help of the US with through grants and tax incentives. And they have been building this huge network of data centers. Everyone has at least, some part of their capital expenditures going straight just to infrastructure. But I don't know, from your video about data centers, the country with the most data centers is the US, but you have to ask yourself, there are some in China, and perhaps there are more than we know of, right? Because, they are, we are not there, and it's kind of obscure to a Westerner exactly what's going on. But at the same time, you can sense that, you can see that there are some there, but it is not the same gold rush that we are seeing in the US. Kind of blows my mind. Why is this huge, obsession at this point? Because I guess that's one word you can use to describe it, with having more infrastructure, this circular investing, and all of these things going on around, not going into the and optimization. I guess there are some initiatives around that, of the models, but it's just that once they have gone and achieved a certain level of advancement in their model, they say, all right, we're going to go all in, billions upon billions of US dollars, just straight into infrastructure, all in the US, compared to China, where they have gone another route. It's the contrast is very striking.
I think my theory about that is actually pretty simple. I rattled off, all the car industry, desktop microprocessors, graphics chips. Literally anything you can think of, you can go on Amazon and you can buy it. For example, 2.5 gigabit per second, multi-gig Ethernet switches. I wanted to buy some. Yeah. I went on Amazon. Western manufacturers, D-Link. Western, more or less Western, known. It's all made in China, whatever. But like D-Link and what's the other one? Cisco, and like all those companies, they make Ethernet switches. Except the multi-gig ones were like a tiny 8-port multi-gig Ethernet switch was like 248 euros. I'm like, that's a gigabit switch is like 18 euros. It's, why is it so much money? So I hop on AliExpress and I can buy a KeepLink brand direct from China for like 48 euros. Yeah. And I'm like, okay, so I'll buy the Chinese one. Like anything you can think of, go on AliExpress and search for it. And there are Chinese knockoffs of them. They're literally producing everything. And I think my theory is that basically Western countries are kind of, let's be honest, we're not doing so hot right now. For a whole variety of reasons. And a lot of that is it's political, it's social, it's cultural. There's a lot of chaos. And I think that the whole AI thing was like, it's almost like one last desperate cry, like, no, we're the tech leaders, we're awesome. Like Intel can't make a good desktop microprocessor to save its life for like the past 5 years. And the Chinese are developing them like gangbusters. And, it's like everyone obviously sees this. While the politicians may be saying this, the CEOs, especially tech CEOs, they see the writing on the wall because, obviously in the auto industry they do, because they're actively working with China and maneuvering to work with them, and because they see the benefit. So I think it's the AI push in part is just this kind of crazed, almost like a kind of Trumpian, I'm the best, nobody can possibly be better than me, blah, blah, blah. And meanwhile, slowly, methodically, with a lot of hard work and sweat, countries like China they're just building up their stuff. And
what they seem to be doing is they are integrating the AI into their already strong verticals, meaning they're already strong production verticals. So they don't have to outsource anything. Some plants can have from the rare earth minerals onto the final product within, I don't know, certain kilometers, but it's all there. While the U.S. it's as the U.S. moved all production, not all production, but a great push was done, cost-wise, to save money moving everything to China. Then they kind of gave away a little bit of their capacity to actually be competitive when China became a powerhouse. At the same time, I do believe that Trump, not Trump, but I guess the U.S. government, they saw that the AI thing is going to be, I don't know, the thing that is going to drive, in a way, the future economies, which is creepy, right? From 2025 going into 2026, they have invested, around, I don't know, 400 billion in 2025, which is a huge amount of money. And now they are considering, they're planning on investing around 600, 700, maybe 800 billion USD just into not only, of course, the infrastructure they have to sustain the AI companies, because they are not profitable. I'm not sure if they're going to be profitable in the next year or 2 years. Some say closer to 2028, 2029, perhaps. And just a fraction of the users are actually paying users. Yeah. So they are just hoarding all of this market share, but you have at some point charge something for the use of the service. But that is, I think globally they will have, of course, the market as well, not only the US, but you have, and another interesting thing is that the US government actually acquired a part of Intel, right, which is rare. And they have this partnership with, this Stargate. Oh, such a cool name, right? The Stargate initiative from 2025, early on. I think it was January, February 2025, when Sam Altman and the guy from SoftBank was there, and Larry Ellison was there, and they make this huge announcement in the Oval Office, and then they said, "Yeah, we are going to win this AI race. We are investing heavily." What do you think is going to happen with all of the capacity, Scotty, when things go, belly up with the prices of oil, rising? Not only the cost of gas, but also, everything around the economy. Food shortages could be a possibility. It's not only just the oil; it's the fertilizers as well, and other things.
Yeah, and with that Sora news, the news that OpenAI's video gen thingy, their video generating AI Sora, that they were canceling it. The article I read noted that in 2025, OpenAI had $13 billion. They made $13 billion. And their plan was to spend something like $1.15 trillion over the next 5 years, which actually means that last year they made 13 billion. This year they're planning on spending, I think it was over 220 billion. And I'm like, do you have any like accountants or economists that work at your company? Because you can't, you're relying on AI to become so popular that your profit will go up by a minimum factor of 17.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get there. And it doesn't make any sense at all. And yeah, I think a lot of people will be coming back down to earth very soon, especially with rising energy prices, because a petroleum shortage. Petroleum is used to make literally everything.
Yeah.
AI is already making RAM prices more expensive. Now they're saying server chips are getting more and more expensive because they're all needed for AI. There's not enough energy to power everything. No. And meanwhile, you can go buy a Chinese Volvo.
Yeah. A Chinese design. Yeah, Volvo. Efficient design Volvo, I guess.
Yeah.
You know what's funny about this Sora thing with OpenAI? That they had this deal with Disney that you were mentioning, and the deal was to use the intellectual property from Disney, including, of course, the Star Wars and the Avengers, right? While you were creating your own videos. I mean, it was for entertainment purposes, right? And for that, Disney invested, or was planning on investing $1 billion into the company, right? So it kind of speaks that, the OpenAI was trying to get money desperately. Now they decided to shut down Sora, so that means that the Disney deal cannot go further, because, of course, Disney was interested in exactly that product. Now, so what's going to happen with? It seems to me that they are reconfiguring their strategy for something, right? They want to focus on, I guess, other areas, and we can speculate on which areas are those. Could be the military. Could be the military, right?
That could be the reason why there's all these news items about, Anthropic in the military, OpenAI in the military, because they're like, please throw money at us, because everyone talking to like Grok or ChatGPT isn't making us enough money to stay alive,
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, so and the other companies are not doing any better. I mean, we kind of call out OpenAI for these strange strategies, but the other ones are not doing any better. I guess that the only one that it is sort of applying, I guess, also in the auto industry is Grok and XAI, this Elon Musk company. But even that, Elon is now conflating or is fusioning the XAI with SpaceX, because he wants to create these space data centers. Scotty, I mean, what's with that?
Like I said, like, you can't make this stuff up.
No. Space data centers.
I mean,
he
he wants to make space data centers, and the other guys are making better cars for people.
Yeah.
Who's gonna win?
The Euro, of course, the American automakers will never, not at least not under Trump or someone aligned with Trump. They will never, look to China, even if maybe Ford has some intention. But I mean, it can quickly be a no. If maybe they didn't get the memo not to have deals with China. In a way, there are some things that the U.S. cannot export to China anymore because of national security purposes. Because it can risk this competitive edge, especially around technology. But at the same time, the U.S. has to deal with China because a lot of the tech and a lot of the actual hardware. I mean, there is no other place in the world that can produce it at the pace and quality, I guess, than China, because they have built this in the industry for over decades now.
Yeah.
So it's a tough relationship between the two,
Yeah. So yeah, where is it all going? I would say, like, we are headed for a bit of a tech reset. I just don't think that it's what everybody thinks. It's not going to be, AI replaces you in your job, and it's not the AI that all the Western companies are pushing. In fact, I think it's going to involve AI, but it's not even going to be AI centric, because unless somebody comes up with like DeepSeek R52 and it's like, Jesus on wheels, and it can like do anything for you, and like the AI killer app, unless somebody makes that, I think it's probably going to be, considering the state of the world, that if energy prices go through the roof, if all this other chaos that's going on, if that carries on, the world is going to need practical things and solutions, not pie in the sky amazing AI that can generate an entire video from some text. Like,
Yeah.
really, who cares? So,
Well, I don't want to be an alarmist, but in a way, food prices rising or just overall the economy, becoming, more difficult for, regular people. I can see mass layoffs, right? And the guy from Anthropic, the CEO said, "Oh yeah, the AI can do menial work, or at least the entry level work."
yeah.
So, I mean, if you put the two together, kind of, it's not looking good, right?
Yeah, or maybe everyone will be laid off because of sky high energy prices and chaos in the world, and not because of AI. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
So I guess we'll find out soon
Yeah.
enough.
Soon, that's the thing, right? I mean, it could happen this year that we figure out where's the intention of all of this.
But in any case, I'm not terribly worried myself about the technology coming out of China. I think it's worth remembering that, as we were talking about earlier, when you buy an American car, it was made in either usually Mexico or Canada with parts that came from China with and subsystems were also made in China and Vietnam and globalization means there's no such thing as an American car or a European car, and the only thing that's really changing here is that a different country is doing a lot of the design, and actually it's the same country doing the building, so it's just a little bit of added design. Is that a giant security threat? I think there are plenty of other bigger, more important things going on in the world that I'm not terribly, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, like, I'm worried about my own government where I live spying on me. I'm not worried about the Chinese spying on me. The Chinese don't give a hoot about me. And if they get the data that Google and the other, Meta and the other giant advertisers are hoovering up about me now, like, okay, so China has that now. Okay, so they know like what kind of gluten-free cookies I like to eat.
Yeah.
But that's just me. So
yeah. I tend to agree with you on that one.
I mean, there's obvious room. There's room for abuse, no matter who controls. I mean, assuming that everyone will act in the best interests of humanity, that's not a clever assumption to make. But
I mean, if it's in terms of learning and understanding the market, I guess of course the European firms will be very knowledgeable about what the European consumer wants. So there's no need to have, it's easier just to acquire a company that already knows the market than to spy on the citizens of that market, right?
Yeah, and in fact, that's what's already been happening. I mean, a couple of years ago, before COVID, a Chinese conglomerate bought. I live in southwestern France near Toulouse, big city. They have an airport. A Chinese conglomerate bought the Toulouse airport, and everyone went, "Oh, okay." And they had huge plans. They were invested in the airport, and they were going to expand the routes and do this and do that. Then came COVID, and air travel dropped off a cliff. Eventually the Chinese conglomerate, they bailed and they sold it back to the French government. And now we have far fewer routes, and they didn't expand the airport as much as they wanted to, and blah blah blah. But so I have kind of like a real life example. Like, it's no different if like China buys your airport and invests in it than if like if the US buys it and invests in it, or another European country, or Timbuktu, or it happens all the time. Like, that's globalism, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolutely. True. Yeah.
So, all right. I guess that about wraps it up then. Hopefully, no one is hiding under their desk at the impending the Chi-Com invasion.
No. I don't think that's the main focus. right now.
I think if they wanted to invade, there are much better ways they could do it.
Oh yeah, they'll just buy something to make it happen. I don't know. I mean, they don't really need to do it themselves. Again, it's just a matter of being practical. They are very practical, right? So
Yeah.
well, they will find a way.
The president of China, I believe, is an engineer, and in the Chinese Communist Party that everyone is so afraid of, the majority of them are actually engineers. So that kind of explains where the motivation for all this tech development came from.
Yeah.
And personally, like, if anything, I'm actually excited after watching what Western companies are doing with tech, or rather what they're not doing.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see, like, what kind of processor does China come up with?
Yeah.
What kind of graphics chip do they come up with? What kind of software? And I'll do exactly what I do with the Western stuff. I'll play with it. I'll use it. I'll poke it. I'll see if it's doing evil stuff and stop it if it is.
Yeah.
For me as a techie, if I just leave the politics out of it, I'm actually pretty excited to see what happens, because, like, AI, as the West defines it, I'm like, wow, I'm not excited. But this, that's a future of technology where I think we could actually see some pretty cool stuff developed in record time. I'm excited, actually. So if that makes me, in an answer to your final question, no, I am not now, nor have I ever been a member of the Chinese Communist Party.
All right, it's good to know.
All right, so I guess that's it for this week. Thanks for tuning in. Like, subscribe. You can also subscribe to ScottiesTech.Info Substack. You can make a donation. Links in the description to help support our show. And thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.
See you.